TrailblazerDX 2026 was not just another Salesforce AI announcement. It was Salesforce saying that the browser is no longer the center of the platform. I'm Robert Wieland, a Salesforce architect focused on AI, automation, and enterprise systems that actually survive production. This is intentional architecture. Today we're talking about what Headless 360 means for architects, admins, and developers who now have to design for humans, agents, APIs, CLIs, and governance at the same time. Because this is not just a development convenience. It changes the operating model. For most of Salesforce's history, the mental model was pretty straightforward. A human logs into Salesforce. They use the browser. They click through a page layout, a Lightning app, a flow, a report, a console, or an Experience Cloud site. Now that user interface mattered because for a lot of organizations, it was the main place where business action happened. But the direction Salesforce is now pointing towards is different. Salesforce co-founder Parker Harris framed it directly. Why should you ever log into Salesforce again? Not as a provocation, but as a direction. Because with Headless 360, Salesforce's position is now this. Everything on the platform is an API, an MCP tool, or a CLI command, and agents can use all of it. So the surfaces have expanded. Not just the browser, not just humans, but agents, integrations, developer tools, command line workflows, coding agents, external apps, and automation. So the important question is no longer just, what does the Salesforce user see on screen? The new question is, what actors are allowed to take action through Salesforce and under what conditions? That is a very different architecture problem. In web architecture, headless usually means you separate the front end from the back end. The presentation layer is decoupled from the system that manages the data, logic, and services underneath. But in this Salesforce context, the more important idea is this. The user interface is no longer the only legitimate way to interact with the platform. And when you remove the UI as the assumed interaction surface, you also lose the implicit guardrails it provided, such as validation on submit, human review before action, visible feedback loops. That sounds simple, but it is a big shift. Because when the browser is the center, your architecture naturally orbits around the human user. Page layouts, screen flows, validation rules, record access, buttons, quick actions, approval steps. All of that still matters. But now, the actor may not be a person clicking a button. The actor might be an AI agent, a workflow, a CLI command, a middleware service, a customer-facing app, a partner portal, a batch process, a coding agent, or another enterprise system. The actor changed, so the architecture has to change with it. This is where the architect's job gets more interesting. Salesforce has always been described in a few different ways. A system of record, a system of engagement, a workflow platform, a customer 360 platform. But in an agentic enterprise, Salesforce also becomes a context and action layer. And those two words matter. Context means Salesforce can help an agent understand the business environment. Accounts, contacts, cases, opportunities, entitlements, products, contracts, customer history, permissions, business rules, previous interactions. That context is powerful, but context alone is just insight. Action is where the risk and value both increase. Because now an agent may be able to do something with that context. create a case, update a record, trigger a flow, call an API, escalate to a human, generate a quote, start an approval, route work, send a notification, or hand off to another system. Here's a concrete example of what this looks like in practice. 6 months ago, updating a case status required a rep to open a console, find the record, and click save. Today, an agent can be triggered by an inbound email, retrieve the account context, update the case status, and send a follow-up notification with no human in the loop. Context without action is just insight, and action without governance is risk. And that is really the heart of this entire shift. This is also where people can get into trouble, because there's a huge difference between a chatbot and an agent that can take action. If a chatbot gives a bad answer, that is a problem. Maybe it frustrates a customer, maybe it creates a support ticket, maybe someone has to correct the answer. But if an agent takes the wrong action, that is a different class of problem. An agent that updates the wrong account is not just giving bad information. An agent that triggers the wrong refund is not just being unhelpful. An agent that emails the wrong customer, exposes the wrong data, changes the wrong entitlement, or kicks off the wrong workflow, that is not a hallucination problem. That is a production incident. So when we talk about agents in Salesforce, we cannot think of them as smarter chat widgets. We have to think of them as participants in business processes. And if they participate in business processes, then they need the same kind of architectural discipline we apply to other production systems. Maybe more. Because unlike a traditional integration, an agent may have a reasoning layer between the request and the action. That reasoning layer can be powerful. But it also means your controls have to be very intentional. This is why permissions and trust boundaries matter more now, not less. The old question was, what can this user see and do? The new question is, what can this user, agent, integration, workflow, model, and toolchain do together? That is a much bigger question, because the risk may not live in one permission set. It may live in the combination of access paths. A user can ask a question, an agent can retrieve context, a tool can call an API, a flow can update a record, a connected app can reach another system, a middleware layer can transform the request, and an automation can complete the business action. Each piece may look reasonable on its own, but together they may create a trust boundary no one actually designed. That is why architects need to think about security as a connected model. Object permissions, field-level security, sharing rules, permission sets, named credentials, connected apps, OAuth scopes, prompt context, data classification, external system access, audit logs, and human approval points. All of that is now part of the same conversation, because the login screen is not the security model. It is just the front door. The real security model is everything that happens after the front door opens. This is also why deterministic logic still matters. And I think this point is going to get more important, not less. AI can reason, it can summarize, it can classify, it can draft, it can recommend, it can route, it can help users navigate complexity. That is all valuable. But enterprise systems still need rules that are explicit, testable, versioned, and auditable. Not every decision should be left to probabilistic reasoning. Pricing rules should not be vibes. Compliance checks should not be vibes. Eligibility criteria should not be vibes. Approval thresholds should not be vibes. Data access should not be vibes. Refunds, cancellations, entitlements, medical workflows, financial workflows, regulated decisions, those need guardrails. This is where agent script matters. AgentScript is Salesforce's language for building agents inside Agentforce Builder. The key design principle is that it lets you define exactly which parts of an agent's behavior must follow explicit business logic deterministically, and which parts the LLM is free to reason through. The Agentforce team put it plainly at TDX. You can't just tune a prompt and call it a good agent. You need guardrails, determinism, trust, and control. That is why AgentScript exists. That distinction matters enormously in production, because the future is not replace all logic with AI. The future is deciding where reasoning belongs, where rules belong, and how they work together safely. Reasoning needs rails. Deterministic logic provides them. The next implication is that agent behavior needs a real SDLC, not vibes. Not, we tested it once in a sandbox and it seemed fine. Not, the demo looked impressive, so we shipped it. But a real life cycle. And here is something worth internalizing from the TDX keynote. With traditional software, it is roughly 80% build, 20% refinement. But with agents, it is the opposite. 20% to get the agent out the door, 80% to actually make it great. That ratio matters because it changes how you plan, staff, and govern agent projects from the start. That means requirements, version control, test cases, evaluation criteria, deployment strategy, monitoring, rollback, incident response, and human handoff. Salesforce has started building this infrastructure directly into the platform. With the testing center, custom scoring evals, observability and session tracing, and A/B testing for agent versions. That tooling exists, but architects have to actually configure and use it, not assume it runs itself. If an agent can participate in a business process, then agent behavior is production logic, and production logic needs governance. That means we need to know things like what version of the prompt was running, what tools did the agent have access to? What data was included in the context? What action did it take? Why did it choose that action? Was there a confidence threshold? Was a human supposed to approve it? Did the business process complete successfully? Can we replay what happened? And can we roll it back? These are not philosophical questions. These are operational questions. And if we do not answer them up front, we will end up answering them during an incident, which is less than fun. So what does this mean practically? For admins, it means your flows, permissions, data quality, and automation design become even more important, because agents will only be as trustworthy as the processes underneath them. If the flow is fragile, the agent inherits that fragility. If the data is messy, the agent inherits that mess. And agent reasoning over duplicate accounts or stale contact records doesn't know the data is wrong. It acts on it with confidence. If the permissions are too broad, the agent may inherit that access. If the business process is unclear, the agent does not automatically make it clear. It just moves faster. For developers, this shift brings APIs, metadata, testing, observability, and integration patterns closer to the center of the Salesforce skill set. Headless 360 means more than 60 new MCP tools and over 30 pre-configured coding skills are now available. So coding agents have direct live access to your entire platform, including your data, workflows, and business logic from the tools you already use, whether that's Claude Code, Cursor, Codex, or Agentforce Vibes. The question is not just, can we build the component? It is, can this action be called safely? Can it be tested? Can it be monitored? Can it fail gracefully? Can it be rolled back? Can another system invoke it without creating chaos? And for architects, the job is expanding. The job is no longer just designing a Salesforce org. It is designing the operating environment where humans, agents, automation, APIs, data, and external systems can safely act together. That means architecture is becoming less about the shape of one system and more about the rules of participation across many actors. If I were reviewing a Salesforce architecture for this new world, these are the questions I would ask. What actions can agents take? What data can they access? What logic must be deterministic, and is that captured in agent script or explicit flow logic? Where's the human handoff? How do we monitor behavior? How do we roll back bad changes? Who approves changes to agent behavior? How are prompts, tools, flows, and permissions versioned? What happened when the agent is technically allowed to do something, but the business never intended it to do that? And who is accountable for outcomes when the agent acts? Not just who built it, but who owns what it does in production. That last bit matters, because allowed does not always mean intended. And in enterprise architecture, the gap between allowed and intended is where incidents live. Accountability is what closes that gap. Headless 360 is not just a product direction, it is a signal. The Salesforce architect's job is expanding. The next Salesforce architect has to design for humans, agents, APIs, automation, and governance at the same time. That is intentional architecture. I hope this was useful, and I'll see you in the next one.